When I came home from work that Friday evening, there was a shiny new padlock hanging from a metal gate across my own driveway. A laminated paper flapped in the wind. Private access, residents only HOA regulation. The problem was, my property wasn't even part of the HOA. I stood there, briefcase still in hand, staring at the absurdity of it. Behind the bars, my own gravel drive stretched up toward the cedar-framed house I'd built myself. Someone had literally fenced me out of my own land. At first, I laughed. It was that kind of disbelieving laugh you do when the world feels like a badly written sitcom. I figured it had to be a mistake. Maybe a contractor misread a map. But when I checked the chain, the padlock was brand new, stamped with the HOA logo. And sitting on my mailbox was a folded notice, signed by Acting Compliance Chair Karen Ellsworth. Of course, the universe had assigned me a Karen. The letter said my driveway violated community access harmony because non-residents were using it as a shortcut to the lakefront. Which was true, technically, except that non-residents were actually me and my friends taking kayaks down to my dock. Karen's house backed onto the same lake from the opposite side, but she'd lost direct water access when the previous owner sold me the strip of land with the old service road. I didn't realize it then, but that strip was the entire root of her obsession. I dialed the number on the letter. She answered before the first ring ended. "Yes," she snapped, as if she were a CEO fielding a hostile takeover. I told her calmly that she'd locked me out of my own property. She replied with the kind of clipped authority that only blossoms when someone's lived too long behind an HOA rulebook. "Sir, this is a temporary measure until we sort out the boundary confusion. You'll need to attend the next board meeting if you wish to contest it." "There's no confusion," I said. "I own the driveway, the survey stakes are right there." She interrupted. "Ownership is a complicated term in shared communities." That's when I realized this wasn't bureaucracy, it was ego. She'd decided the road looked too convenient, too useful to someone else, and therefore must belong to her imaginary jurisdiction. I cut the lock with my bolt cutters, drove through, and went inside. By morning, another lock appeared. This time, a heavier chain and a printed warning that tampering would incur fines. I didn't even belong to their HOA, but the gall of it was impressive. I decided to document everything. Photos, dates, even video. Experience had taught me that people like Karen only learned lessons when their own evidence turned against them. That weekend, she marched down my drive wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and carrying a clipboard like it was a badge. Behind her trotted two men with neon vests labeled Compliance. She didn't greet me, she just pointed at the gravel. "This surface doesn't meet runoff standards. We'll be paving it next month." I asked whose we she meant. "Community development," she replied. The HOA voted to assume maintenance of all access points to the lake. I told her I hadn't voted nor consented. She smiled in that patient predator way. "Then you can petition for an exception, but until then, the board will proceed." It wasn't about runoff or paving. It was about control. She couldn't stand that the only road reaching the public fishing dock ran through my private property. She wanted to gate it, regulate it, own it symbolically. That evening I visited the county land records office. The clerk confirmed every inch from the paved street to the lakeshore was mine, deed and all. There was even a 10-foot easement along the waterline, meaning no one could block my access. But the HOA had zero legal standing beyond its defined subdivision. My parcel was outside their plat map by 50 yards. It was like trying to find the moon for shining too bright. I made color copies of the deed and mailed them, certified, to Karen and the board president. I even wrote a polite note. "Please refrain from obstructing private access. Future interference will be reported." I thought that would settle it. Monday morning, the gate was welded shut. Not locked, welded. She'd escalated faster than a wildfire in a hay barn. When I called the sheriff, the deputy knew the situation before I finished explaining. "You're not the first," he said. "That lady treats bylaws like scripture. He examined the welds, shook his head, and radioed in a vandalism report. Karen appeared halfway through, arms folded, face pinched. "Officer," she said, "this man is endangering children by allowing lake traffic through private property." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, it's his property," she scoffed. "That's under review." He actually laughed. "Not by anyone who matters, ma'am." She turned red enough to match her manicure and stormed off, muttering about appeals and environmental boards. The deputy cut the gate with his saw, warned her to stay off the property, and left. But I knew she wasn't finished. Entitled people rarely accept reality on the first swing. I installed cameras along the fence and a motion light near the drive entrance. 2 nights later, they caught her again. This time directing a contractor's truck to dump a pile of gravel across my entry. The footage was gold. Her shouting orders, hands on hips, headlamp bobbing like she was leading a moonlit construction raid. I didn't confront her immediately. I sent the footage to the same deputy, who forwarded it to the county attorney. That started a paper trail that would later save me a fortune. For now, I simply cleared the gravel with my tractor and pretended indifference. Karen interpreted silence as weakness. That was fine, I was setting the stage. A week later, flyers appeared on neighborhood mailboxes. Upcoming access adjustment, community driveway integration vote. I nearly admired her creativity. She was trying to get the HOA to adopt my road formally by vote, assuming collective momentum would override property law. I decided to attend the meeting she'd once insisted I join. The clubhouse was packed with retirees and suburban crusaders armed with coffee cups and clipboards. Karen stood at the front beside a projector, radiating smug command. When she saw me enter, her smile faltered just enough to reveal fear. "Oh, Mr. Lawson," she said, voice syrupy. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, taking a seat in the front row. She launched into her presentation about community safety, showing photos of my driveway with red arrows and captions like unregulated entry and potential hazard. The crowd murmured approvingly. Then I raised my hand. "Quick question," I said. "Before we vote to annex private land, has anyone here checked the county plat map?" A hush fell. Karen stammered something about shared jurisdiction. I pulled out the oversized deed copy, unfolded it dramatically on the table, and pointed at the line clearly marking my parcel. Gasp. Someone near the back whispered, "So it's not even HOA property?" Karen's face drained of color. She tried to pivot, claiming it was about community cohesion, but the spell had broken. After the meeting, she cornered me outside. "You humiliated me," she hissed. "You have no idea what you've started." I told her quietly, "I think I do. You built a gate. Now I'm building something too." And I meant it, because by the next month, thanks to a single line in the property survey, I realized I could change everything. My driveway wasn't just my access. It was the only viable route left for anyone to reach the public lake after a recent zoning update. If I rerouted it slightly, all other paths would cross my land. Karen had tried to gate me out. I was about to make her beg for the key. The morning after that HOA meeting felt different. The usual silence of my property had a charged edge, like the air before a thunderstorm. Karen's gate stunt had triggered something in me I hadn't realized I still had, that slow, strategic stubbornness you get from years of dealing with unreasonable people in polite settings. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calculating. My first call was to a surveyor named Jean, the same one who'd mapped the lakeshore years earlier. He still remembered the property. When I explained what had happened, he chuckled. "She's done that before, huh?" I heard stories. He agreed to meet me that afternoon. Together, we walked the full length of my boundary line, from the asphalt road to the dock. The new zoning update had shifted the public easement slightly due to shoreline erosion. It meant my driveway, the only stable land route, was now the only legal path connecting the neighborhood to the lake's public access. Without it, they'd need to apply for new right-of-way permits through the county, a process that could take years. So technically, I said, they can only reach the lake through my drive. Exactly, Jean said. Unless they build a bridge through the marsh, which they won't. I thanked him, paid in cash, and spent the evening studying map. The next morning, I called a fencing contractor and ordered a new wooden gate at the end of my property line. Not the flimsy kind Karen installed, a heavy, cedar beam structure with a keycode lock. I put up a clean metal sign beside it. Private access road, use by permission only. Within 24 hours, Karen appeared at the gate like a storm in heels. Her Lexus screeched to a halt, and she stepped out waving her phone like a warrant. "You can't do this," she barked. "This is community infrastructure." "Funny," I said, "that's what you said about my driveway." She took a photo of the gate and promised to report it to the board. I told her to make sure to spell my name correctly on the complaint this time. She demanded the code. I told her politely that permission would depend on future cooperation. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She stormed back into her car, tires spinning gravel across my boot. 2 days later, HOA flyers went out again. Emergency community meeting regarding lake access crisis. The word crisis made me laugh. She'd gone from self-appointed gatekeeper to emergency coordinator in under a week. I didn't attend this time. I didn't need to. The panic alone was leverage. By the next weekend, I started getting knocks at my gate. First a man in a fishing hat asking if I could open the road just for today. Then a mother with 2 kids holding inflatable kayak. Everyone had the same look, polite frustration mixed with fear of breaking rules. I explained to each of them, gently, that I was happy to allow access through a simple permission form. A one-time liability waiver. They signed without hesitation. I printed each waiver on thick paper and filed it neatly in a binder labeled, Access Agreements. Every signature was another small victory, another layer of legal insulation. Then, almost poetically, the county inspector arrived. Karen had filed a formal complaint that I was blocking a public road. The inspector's name was Lopez, a calm man who had clearly dealt with HOA drama before. I handed him copies of the deed, the survey, and the video of Karen welding her previous gate. He examined them carefully, nodded, and said, "You're in the clear. In fact, it looks like they're trespassing." That word, trespassing, must have echoed across the HOA grapevine like a bomb. By the following Tuesday, I received a letter signed by Karen herself. It was 1 part apology, 9 parts manipulation. She wrote that, in the spirit of community unity, she proposed we jointly manage the driveway access under a cooperative framework. Translation: she wanted a keycode. I wrote back a single sentence. Access granted only upon formal agreement and maintenance contribution. The next morning, her husband showed up. I'd only seen him from a distance before. The kind of quiet man whose main hobby is avoiding his wife's arguments. He stood awkwardly at the gate holding a clipboard. "Look," he said, "she's passionate. Maybe we can just split maintenance costs? I'll Venmo you today." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Sure," I said. "We can set that up through the county. It'll take a few weeks." He sighed in relief, probably thinking he'd solved it. I knew better. The paperwork would show that his payment constituted recognition of my ownership. Once filed, the HOA could never claim control again. But Karen didn't stop. That week, she parked her SUV across the gate, blocking my own exit. When I honked, she stood beside the car with arms crossed. "This is harassment," she shouted. "You're extorting the community." I pulled out my phone and started filming. Her voice softened instantly. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I absolutely would," I said. "In fact, the county attorney would love another installment." She got back in her car and left. A few nights later, I saw her walking the property line with a flashlight, muttering to herself. She was tracing the old fence line, looking for any angle to argue easement rights. I stayed quiet, lights off, watching from my porch. It was almost fascinating, watching entitlement turn into obsession. The next morning, she tried a new tactic. She called the county environmental office claiming that my gravel runoff was contaminating the lake. 2 inspectors came out. They ran a quick check, found nothing, and even complimented my drainage system. "Whoever reported this doesn't understand soil grade," one of them said. "You're fine." I thanked them, then sent Karen a cheerful text. "Your science project failed. Maybe next time try physics." It drove her insane. She started pacing the neighborhood, gathering signatures for a community petition to restore shared access. Most residents refused to sign, especially after I'd let them use the driveway under my waiver system. They realized access through me was easier, cleaner, and safer than under Karen's crusade. Some even thanked me for maintaining the road better than the HOA ever had. Then came the twist I'd been waiting for. A developer approached the HOA about expanding the lake's public facilities, a new dock and picnic area. The only catch? The only usable land route for construction equipment ran through my driveway. Karen must have realized it about the same time I did, because within days she was at my gate again, this time wearing a fake friendly smile. "Hi there," she began sweetly. "I wanted to discuss a temporary access permit for the developer. It benefits the whole community and I'm sure you'd want to cooperate." "Of course," I said. "For a fee." Her smile froze. "A fee?" "Yes. Temporary easement fee. Standard rate for private access use. $10,000. She sputtered like a kettle about to explode. "That's outrageous." "Not really," I said. "It's what the county charges for private land access during construction. You can verify it." I wasn't bluffing, I'd already done the math. She turned on her heel and left. 2 days later, I received an email from the developer himself, apologizing for community confusion and offering to pay my proposed fee directly. He wired the deposit that afternoon. By the end of the week, heavy equipment rolled through my gate, legally. Karen watched from her porch as trucks she couldn't control rumbled past her house. Every beep of a reversing loader was a victory horn. When the work finished, the developer sent me a thank you note and 2 season passes to the new lake park. I posted a photo of the passes on the neighborhood Facebook group with a simple caption: "Property rights are beautiful." Karen didn't comment publicly. But that night, my cameras caught her again, standing by the gate, hand resting on the wood, face lit by the motion light. For the first time, she looked small, defeated but still scheming. I knew she'd be back with another angle. Entitlement rarely dies quietly. But now the balance had shifted. My driveway wasn't just a boundary anymore. It was leverage. The next move would have to come from her, and whatever it was, I'd be ready. Karen disappeared for nearly a week after the construction trucks left. It was the quietest 7 days the neighborhood had seen in months. I almost started to believe she'd given up, until I received a certified letter stamped urgent, property inquiry. Inside was a formal notice from a lawyer named Stanley Reeves representing the Lakeside Homeowners Association. The letter alleged that my driveway constituted a safety hazard, violated shared community easements, and may be subject to eminent domain for public access purposes. I had to read that twice. Eminent domain, from an HOA attorney. It was the legal equivalent of a mosquito threatening a bulldozer. Still, it told me one thing. Karen had upgraded her campaign from local nuisance to full-blown legal theater. I called Reeves directly. His tone was smooth, rehearsed, and just shy of patronizing. "We're simply exploring the possibility of establishing community access," he said. "If we can agree to a voluntary easement, we'd avoid involving the county." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "You might want to involve them anyway," I said. "Because they'll laugh harder than I will." Then I faxed him copies of the same deed, survey, and correspondence already on record. An hour later, his secretary called to apologize for any misunderstanding. I could practically hear the sound of Karen's checkbook screaming in the background. The next day, I saw her at the end of her driveway, phone glued to her ear, voice sharp enough to cut glass. She was yelling at someone, probably Reeves, waving one arm in circles like she could physically whip reality back into compliance. When she noticed me watching, she gave a tight smile and mouthed, "You'll regret this." By midweek, her retaliation shifted into a new form: nuisance complaint. Every 2 days, a different county department visited. Noise complaint. Illegal dumping. Unregistered utility vehicle. Each time, an inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, looking embarrassed. They'd see my property, perfectly in order, and leave apologetically. One even told me, "Whoever's reporting you has a vendetta." I didn't bother confronting her. Instead, I kept every report, every inspector's note, and compiled them into a folder labeled "Pattern of Harassment." Documentation was my fortress. While she tried to bury me in paperwork, I was quietly turning every shovel of dirt into her own hole. But then came her most desperate maneuver yet. She tried to rally the neighborhood against me. Flyers again, this time in bold red font. "Say no to greed, reclaim our lake access." It had a photo of my gate, zoomed in to look like a fortress wall. I found one pinned to my mailbox, rain-streaked and half-torn. I could almost hear her voice narrating it. "He's blocking our heritage." I decided it was time to attend one more HOA meeting, not as a target but as a storyteller. When I walked into the clubhouse that evening, the crowd was larger than before. Karen stood near the podium, radiating false confidence, rehearsing her lines to a cluster of sympathetic faces. She didn't expect me. When she saw me take a seat near the front, her expression flickered. She began her speech dramatically, voice trembling with fake emotion. "For decades, our community has enjoyed open, fair access to the lake. One individual has decided to take that away. This is about fairness, about shared enjoyment of our environment." The murmurs of agreement around the room were quiet but noticeable. Then I raised my hand. "May I speak?" Karen hesitated, but the board chair, a tired man clearly done with the theatrics, sighed and nodded. I stood, walked to the projector, and plugged in a flash drive. On the screen appeared footage from my security camera. Karen welding the original gate shut, directing gravel trucks, screaming at the deputy, and finally blocking the road with her Lexus. Gasps filled the room. "Fairness," I said evenly. "This is what fairness looked like when she was in charge of my driveway." Karen sputtered. "That's taken out of context." "No," I said, "that is the context." Then I clicked to the next slide. A scanned letter from the county confirming the road's private ownership and legal access terms. "And this," I continued, "is the law. What's happening now isn't a misunderstanding. It's harassment." The room was silent. One man in the back muttered, "She welded his gate?" Karen's face went crimson. She tried to regain control. "You don't understand," she stammered. "If he controls the access, he controls the community." "Exactly," I said. "And unlike your HOA, I don't fine people for fishing." Laughter broke out, small at first, then louder. Karen froze, eyes darting as her authority dissolved in real time. The board chair tapped his pen. "I think we've heard enough. This isn't HOA business anymore." That line hit her like a shovel to the gut. The meeting ended abruptly. As I left, a few neighbors shook my hand. One whispered, "Thank you for standing up to her." Another slipped me a card, apparently a local reporter interested in neighborhood drama turned legal circus. I tucked it away. I wasn't ready to go public yet. By the next morning, Karen's retaliation had gone silent. No flyers, no knocks, no inspectors. The calm was suspicious, the kind that hides before another storm. I decided to prepare. I had an idea, part practical, part poetic. Since the county recognized my road as the only access route, I could register it under a formal name. I filed the paperwork to rename it Ellsworth Passage. The clerk didn't bat an eye. It was a perfectly legal request. A month later, the county installed the new green sign at the street corner. Ellsworth Passage, private drive. The day it went up, Karen nearly exploded. She drove past 3 times, slowing each time longer, her jaw tight enough to crack teeth. The sign immortalized her obsession in metal, the ultimate insult. That night, she knocked on my gate. It was almost midnight. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand. "Take that down," she hissed. "It's county property," I said. "Can't touch it." "You're mocking me." I shrugged. "I'm commemorating you." She pointed a trembling finger. "You're sick." "Maybe," I said, "but I sleep great." She left without another word. The next morning, I found a dead fish on my porch. Small, fresh, obviously placed. Not the kind of thing nature delivers on cue. I didn't take the bait. I just added a photo of it to my harassment file. Weeks passed. The HOA grew quieter. People stopped treating me like a villain. Some even started using the road more, thanking me for keeping it clean and open. Karen's isolation was complete. But people like her don't crumble quietly, they reinvent themselves. And she did, in the worst possible way. One afternoon, I came home to find a crew digging near the fence line between our properties. When I asked the foreman what they were doing, he said, "Installing drainage. HOA project." I checked the markings. The trench ran straight across the edge of my boundary. I called Karen. She answered instantly. "Oh, I assumed you wouldn't mind. We're diverting runoff to help with the lake's water table." "Onto my land?" "Technically, it's shared slope. Technically, you're trespassing." I called the sheriff again. When the deputy arrived, he looked tired but amused. "You again," he said. Then he looked at the trench, shook his head, and told the crew to stop. He warned Karen this time would go on record as a property violation. She tried to argue environmental necessity, but even the deputy wasn't having it. "Lady," he said, "if you want to fix the lake, stop filling it with drama." That quote made it into the local paper the next week, courtesy of the same reporter who'd attended the HOA meeting. The article headline: "Neighborhood feud over driveway turns into legal landmark." It painted me as the calm, reasonable homeowner and Karen as a self-appointed enforcer of community aesthetics. She hated it. Her Facebook rants turned frantic, full of accusations about corrupt county alliances and biased media. The more she posted, the less anyone believed her. By then, my gate had become a local curiosity. People took selfies with the Ellsworth Passage sign. Fishermen waved when they drove through. One even left a bottle of whiskey at the post with a note, "For standing your ground." But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't finished. She was wounded, humiliated, and out of options, which meant she'd soon do something reckless. And reckless people, I've learned, make the best stories, as long as you stay 2 steps ahead. And I was already 3. The first sign that Karen was unraveling came not from her, but from her husband. He knocked on my door early one Saturday morning, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair flattened like he'd been sleeping in his car. "I need to ask a favor," he said quietly. "Please, don't involve the police this time." I invited him in. He looked around, almost surprised by how normal my house was. Maybe he expected trophies made from HOA bylaws. "She's obsessed," he admitted. "She's up all night reading county codes. She's convinced you forged documents. She's even started emailing the governor." I poured him coffee. "You married a hurricane," I said. He sighed. "Yeah, and I thought I could be the calm after it. Turns out I'm just the roof she tears off." He asked me, almost pleading, to avoid provoking her further. "She's fragile right now. Humiliated." I told him I wasn't planning anything. "I'm just living my life," I said, though we both knew that, to Karen, my existence was provocation enough. After he left, I checked my cameras. Sure enough, she'd been pacing by the gate at 2 a.m., flashlight in hand again. She was studying the sign like it was mocking her, which, to be fair, it kind of was. I decided to move the camera angle slightly, capturing not just the gate but the space behind it, the part of the lake road that curved near her backyard. Something told me she'd try something new soon. I was right. 3 nights later, my phone pinged at 1:23 a.m., motion detected. I opened the feed and froze. Karen was there with 2 men and a pickup truck. They were unloading concrete blocks and rebar. She was directing them with a flashlight, pointing toward the ditch near the edge of my property. I recognized the outline immediately. She was trying to pour a retaining wall that would effectively cut off half my drive. I recorded everything. I didn't call the sheriff this time. I called my lawyer, a man named Patel who specialized in property law. He picked up groggily but perked up fast when I told him what was happening. "Record everything," he said. "Let them finish enough to show intent. Then we'll file for injunctive relief and damages. You're about to own her HOA." By dawn, the wall stood half-finished, ugly, crooked, and completely illegal. I walked out calmly, coffee in hand, as the workers packed up. Karen was beaming like she'd just conquered Rome. "Good morning," she chirped. "We've decided to fortify the slope for erosion control." "On my land?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's a gray area. You can thank me later." I smiled. "Oh, I plan to." That day, Patel filed an emergency injunction with the county court. Within 48 hours, a judge granted a cease and desist order and scheduled a hearing. The sheriff's office hand-delivered the notice to Karen's door. I didn't see it, but my neighbor told me she screamed loud enough to startle the geese off the lake. The hearing was brief but glorious. Patel laid out the evidence: deeds, survey lines, timestamps, and most damning of all, video footage of Karen supervising the construction at 1 a.m. The judge didn't even let her lawyer finish his opening. "Ms. Ellsworth," he said, "you've trespassed, vandalized, and attempted to alter property that's not yours. I'm issuing a permanent restraining order regarding any interference with Mr. Lawson's land. You will also cover his legal fees and the cost of demolition." Her jaw dropped. "Demolition?" "Yes," the judge said dryly. "The wall you built illegally." She opened her mouth again, but her lawyer tugged her sleeve. The ruling was final. 2 weeks later, a demolition crew arrived, funded by the HOA's insurance, since Karen had claimed she acted in official capacity. The sound of jackhammers echoed across the lake like poetic justice in surround sound. I sat on my porch, sipping iced tea as the wall crumbled into dust. For a while, peace returned. Karen stayed out of sight. Her husband waved awkwardly whenever he drove past. The lake road was quiet again, dotted with friendly visitors who still signed my access waivers. It almost felt like victory. But people like Karen don't disappear. They retreat and reload. One evening in early spring, I noticed new stakes along the far edge of my property, bright orange ones with survey ribbons. My first thought was another HOA stunt, but the tags had the county's logo. I called Patel again. He made some calls, then got back to me sounding amused. "You're going to like this," he said. "She's filed a petition to have a new public access road built, right through her own backyard." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. "You're kidding." "Nope. She's claiming it'll alleviate traffic pressure on Ellsworth Passage. She's trying to make her property the new access point." That explained the sudden quiet. She'd shifted strategy. I could almost respect the pivot if it weren't so predictably self-destructive. The proposal required environmental assessments, community approval, and county funding, none of which she had. But it did give me an idea. I contacted the same developer who'd built the new dock last season. They'd been planning to add a lakeside trail and picnic area but needed permission for the starting route. I offered them a deal: exclusive access through Ellsworth Passage, long-term easement in exchange for regular maintenance and upgrades. They jumped at it. Within 2 months, the old gravel stretch transformed. Fresh asphalt, proper drainage, painted lines, all paid for by the developer. A beautiful sign went up: Welcome to Lakeside Trail, access courtesy of Ellsworth Passage. It was the final straw. Karen's face when she saw it could have powered A.S. Mall City. She marched up to the gate again, slamming her fists against it. "You're turning this into a circus," she screamed. "You're monetizing public land." "It's called a partnership," I said. "And it's perfectly legal." Her husband arrived minutes later, trying to pull her back. She turned on him, voice cracking. "You're on his side now too?" He didn't answer. He just looked tired. She stormed off down the road, shouting something about corruption and appeals. The following week, I started receiving calls from journalists. Apparently, Karen had filed complaints not just with the county, but with a local environmental coalition, accusing me of commercial exploitation of a natural resource. It might have been annoying if it weren't so predictable. I sent the reporters full documentation, property rights, contracts, permits, and they turned the story into something entirely different. The headline read, "Homeowner turns HOA feud into public benefit partnership." It painted me as a visionary neighbor who turned conflict into progress. My phone blew up with congratulations from people I didn't even know. The county commissioner emailed me personally to thank me for improving community infrastructure. Karen must have seen it, because that night she drove past my house slowly, headlights off, windows down. My cameras caught her silhouette, motionless at the wheel, staring at the trail sign before driving away. The next day, her husband came by one last time. "We're selling," he said quietly. "I can't do this anymore." I nodded. "Probably for the best." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "She'll never admit it, but she met her match." They moved out a month later. The house went to a retired couple who spent most of their days gardening and waving at everyone who passed. The neighborhood finally exhaled. That summer, the trail officially opened. Kids rode bikes down the newly paved road, couples walked their dogs, fishermen hauled kayaks past the gate, smiling and waving. Every so often, someone would point at the sign and ask if Ellsworth Passage was named after anyone. I'd just smile and say, "It's a long story." And it was. But it wasn't quite over yet. Because a few weeks later, while trimming the hedges near the gate, I found something wedged behind a post, a rusted padlock, the same model she'd used that first day to lock me out. Someone had left it there, dangling on a nail, like a relic. Maybe she left it before moving. Maybe it was her twisted way of saying goodbye. I hung it on my porch, next to the gate key. A reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, it's paved, maintained, and open for business. For almost 6 months, peace held steady on Ellsworth Passage. The new neighbors, George and Patty Miller, were the sort of people small towns desperately need. Quiet, friendly, and allergic to drama. Patty baked pies for everyone on the block, George kept his lawn trimmed with military precision, and nobody mentioned Karen unless it was in a nostalgic laugh. The HOA even started holding meetings without her name on the agenda. For the first time in years, the lakefront felt like a community again instead of a Cold War. The irony, of course, is that peace never lasts where paperwork exists. One October afternoon, I was cleaning leaves from the drainage ditch along the drive when a white county vehicle pulled up. The man who stepped out wore a safety vest and carried a clipboard, the universal sign that someone was about to ruin your day with good manners. "Morning," he said. "Mr. Lawson? I'm here about a property reassessment." "Reassessment?" I asked. "For taxes." "Not exactly." He flipped through his folder. "There's a pending petition to reclassify the access route to the lake as a public utility road. Apparently, it's connected to an environmental restoration project from 2 years ago." My stomach tightened. "From who?" He scanned his sheet. "Filed by a Ms. Karen Ellsworth." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "She doesn't even live here anymore." "Doesn't matter," he said. "She filed it before she sold the property. County's just now processing the backlog." And just like that, Karen's ghost was back, not in person but in paper. Bureaucracy never forgets. The reassessment itself wasn't automatically dangerous, but it meant one thing. If the county approved it, Ellsworth Passage could be designated a public access road. I'd lose control. The HOA would have their wish granted posthumously by paperwork. I called Patel immediately. "Can they do this?" I asked. He sighed. "Technically, yes, but only if the road serves a public necessity. We'll fight it. Send me everything." He was calm, but I could hear the tension underneath. Government red tape is like quicksand. Step wrong, and even logic won't save you. A week later, the county board posted a notice for a public hearing. Petition to reclassify access Route 16B, Ellsworth Passage. The HOA licked its lips. Karen's old allies came crawling back from whatever holes they'd hidden in. Suddenly, everyone was talking about restoring Karen's vision. Flyers reappeared, this time printed by someone new, the vice president of the HOA, a man named Douglas Crane, who'd kept his head low during the earlier drama. Now he was wearing her mantle. Crane wasn't a screamer like Karen. He was worse, polite, patient, and deadly organized. He called me personally, voice as smooth as polished stone. "I think we can avoid conflict here, Mr. Lawson. The board simply wants a mutually beneficial solution." "That's what she said before welding my gate shut," I replied. He laughed softly. "I assure you, I'm not Karen." "No," I said. "You're what she wished she could be." The night of the hearing, the county building was packed. Reporters, residents, board members, all buzzing like flies over a dropped soda can. Crane spoke first. "This access has become critical infrastructure," he said smoothly. "It connects dozens of residents and supports public recreation. We're simply asking for formal recognition, for the good of the community." Then it was my turn. I laid out everything, the property maps, the partnership agreements, the court rulings. "Ellsworth Passage exists because the county confirmed it's private," I said. "The public already benefits, but that doesn't mean ownership disappears. The law doesn't reward trespassers just because they walk politely." There was polite applause, but I could tell the room was divided. Bureaucrats love shared solutions, because it makes them feel like diplomat. One board member leaned forward. "Mr. Lawson, if we maintain the road, wouldn't that benefit you too?" I nodded. "Sure. Until one of you decides to put a speed bump through my living room." The audience laughed, even the board smiled, but Crane didn't. His eyes stayed locked on me, calculating. The board postponed the decision for further review. That phrase was poison. It meant delay, more paperwork, and more opportunities for manipulation. Crane had found his opening. Over the next month, the county survey teams came by repeatedly, measuring, photographing, cataloging. Then, late one evening, I saw something that made my jaw clench. Fresh spray paint markings had appeared along the asphalt, orange lines labeled utility easement. Someone was prepping groundwork before any decision had even been made. Patel confirmed my fear. "Crane's lobbying someone inside the planning office," he said. "They're acting like the reclassification's a done deal." "So what do? We play chess." He advised me to file a counterpetition, to designate Ellsworth Passage as a private conservation access route under state property law. It sounded obscure because it was, but it had one key clause. Any road registered as such couldn't be converted into public infrastructure without owner consent. It was an obscure legal shield, but it might just hold. We filed it within 48 hours. And just like that, I'd thrown a wrench into the bureaucratic gears. Crane retaliated by weaponizing public sympathy. He gave an interview to the local paper, smiling like a senator. "We only want unity," he said. "It's a shame one man is holding the entire community hostage." The comments section went feral. Half the town called me greedy, the other half called me a hero. Someone even made memes of my gait. My personal favorite was one captioned, "Welcome to Ellsworth Passage, now accepting tolls and tears." The online circus might have been funny if the consequences weren't so real. Vandals started appearing, small acts at first. Beer cans by the trailhead, graffiti on the back fence. Then one night, someone threw paint across my gate. Red letters spelled, "Community Access Now." I cleaned it off without a word. Silence was still my strongest weapon. But Patel urged me to go public. "You need to win the narrative," he said. "Show them this isn't about ego, it's about property rights." So, reluctantly, I agreed to an interview with the same journalist who'd covered the earlier feud. He asked good questions about freedom, ownership, entitlement, and I answered simply, truthfully. "It started with a gate," I said. "But this isn't about fences. It's about respect. For boundaries, for law, for common sense." The article went viral again, titled "The Man Who Beat the HOA, and Might Have to Do It Twice." The comments section flipped in my favor. By the next hearing, the crowd was twice as large, and this time, most were cheering for me. Crane still tried. He presented a slideshow about communal equity and inclusive recreation. I countered by reading the environmental law that made my counterpetition valid. The board deliberated for nearly an hour. Finally, the chair spoke. After reviewing both petitions, the board recognizes Ellsworth Passage as a private conservation access route under Section 14B. Any reclassification will require owner approval. In other words, I won again. The applause was real, thunderous, cathartic. Crane sat there, face unreadable. When it was over, he approached me quietly. "You can't keep this up forever," he said. "People like you always get tired." "Maybe," I said. "But I've got more patience than you've got entitlement." He left without another word. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to satisfaction, not gloating, just that quiet warmth of surviving another storm. But as I walked home along the road that bore Karen's name, I couldn't shake the thought that this fight had outlived its original players. She'd started it out of control and pride. Crane had revived it for power and politics. And me? Somewhere along the way, defending myself had become a mission. That night, I stood by the gate, looking out over the water glinting in the moonlight. The reflection of the Ellsworth Passage sign rippled across the surface like a scar and a crown all at once. Peace might come again, I thought, but only until someone else forgot where their property line ended and their ego began. And around here, that never took long. Winter hit early that year, sharp and sudden, like the universe decided the lake had enjoyed too much peace. The water froze thin and pale, and the air carried that metallic stillness that makes sound travel twice as far. From my porch, I could see the sign for Ellsworth Passage gleaming under frost, and sometimes, when the light hit just right, I imagined Karen's reflection hovering over it, that same furious tilt of her chin. I thought the story was finally over. But life loves sequels, especially when pride still lingers in the air like smoke. It began with a rumor. One of the fishermen told me that someone new had bought Karen's old house, a woman from out of state who wanted to bring order back to the community. I didn't think much of it until the moving truck arrived. The side of it read EntitledPeople Property Management. That name made me laugh until I realized what it meant. Karen hadn't sold her house to a family. She'd sold it to a company, and they were turning it into a vacation rental. Within a week, the peace dissolved. Strangers flooded in every weekend. Loud music, bonfires, headlights sweeping across the water at 2 a.m. The HOA couldn't regulate rentals outside their covenants, and my road, my beautiful, freshly paved Ellsworth Passage, had become their primary route. They left beer cans by the gate, parked halfway across my drive, and occasionally stumbled up to my porch asking where the party dock was. It was Karen's revenge from beyond the property line. She'd turned her defeat into a loophole. I started documenting again. Photos, videos, timestamp. Patel laughed when I called him. "She really built a legacy, didn't she?" "I don't want another fight," I said. "I just want quiet." "Then we'll use her own weapon," he replied. "Paperwork." He helped me file a private access use agreement with the county. It allowed me to restrict usage hours, require permit tags, and charge maintenance fees to any commercial entities using my road. Within 2 weeks, I had the legal right to post new signage. Private access, commercial use by permit only, violators will be billed. The next weekend, when the renters showed up in a convoy of SUVs, I greeted them with polite smiles and fresh printed copies of the new permit form. They looked bewildered, then annoyed, then resigned. Most paid the small fee, $50 a weekend. One even said, "Man, you run this place better than the HOA." The irony wasn't lost on me. But word spread quickly, and soon Eastbrook's manager, a young man named Nolan, came storming down my road with a clipboard and attitude. "You can't charge our tenants to use a public access road," he declared. "Private road," I corrected. "Registered under Section 14B, Conservation Access Route." He frowned. "That's not real. Call the county." He did, right there, on speakerphone. The county clerk confirmed it, verbatim. His face twisted into the same mix of shock and humiliation I'd seen on Karen's all those months ago. "You're kidding," he muttered. "Nope," I said. "Welcome to Ellsworth Passage." He left without another word. The next morning, the signs had been torn down. Every last one. Cameras caught 2 men doing it around midnight, using flashlights and gloves. I filed another report. Patel prepared another motion. The fines hit Eastbrook like a sledgehammer, nearly $3,000 in vandalism and unauthorized access fees. They didn't pay right away, but I had time, and patience was my greatest weapon. By spring, Eastbrook was bleeding from every direction: bad reviews, HOA complaints, dwindling bookings. The final blow came when the county sent them a letter confirming that their access rights were temporarily suspended pending dispute resolution. They couldn't even advertise lake access anymore. That's when Nolan came back, hat in hand, asking for a truce. "We'll pay the maintenance fee," he said. "Whatever you want, just let us keep access." I nodded slowly. "Sure," I said. "But there's a new condition." He looked wary. "What condition?" "You rename the property on your listings." He frowned. "To what?" "Karen's Folly." He blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." He refused at first. But when bookings dropped further and guests complained about no lake access, he caved. Within a month, every rental app listed the property under its new title: Karen's Folly or Lakeside Retreat Limited Access. The reviews wrote themselves. Strangest rules ever. Owner of the road is a legend. Worth the story alone. The name stuck. Even the post office adopted it informally. It became a local in-joke. People started taking photos next to the sign, tourists asked about the legend of Karen's Folly, and soon enough, my once battled driveway turned into a quiet monument to the absurdity of entitlement. Still, sometimes late at night, I'd walk down to the gate and stare at the road glittering under the motion light. The sound of wind through the trees still carried her echo, that sharp, clipped tone, the endless need to control what wasn't hers. And yet, in some strange way, I was grateful. Without her, none of this would exist. Not the trail, not the partnerships, not even the peace that followed. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single page torn from a legal pad. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, slanted, angry. "Congratulations," it read. "You turned everyone against me. But remember, without me, your little road wouldn't even have a name." I folded the letter neatly and set it on my porch table, under the old rusted padlock she'd left behind. "You're right," I said aloud to no one. "And I'll make sure they never forget it." That summer, I hosted a small neighborhood barbecue, my first ever. The guests were neighbors, fishermen, even a few county officials. Someone brought a cake shaped like a road sign that said, Ellsworth Passage. Everyone laughed, toasted, and told the story of the HOA that tried to own the world and lost. During the last hour, as dusk settled and the lake turned gold, Patty Miller asked me, "Do you ever miss the fight?" I thought about it. The truth was complicated. "Not the fight," I said. "Just the purpose." "Then maybe it's time to find a new one," she said. She was right. By the end of that year, I'd started a small advocacy group, helping other homeowners tangled in HOA overreach. I called it Boundaries Matter. The first meeting drew 6 people. The second drew 20. By the 5th, we had county representatives asking for advice on community dispute reform. I guess you could say Karen's war gave birth to something useful. Months later, as snow fell again over Ellsworth Passage, I stood by the gate one last time before heading in for the night. The new motion light cast long shadows over the asphalt, and the cold air carried the faint hum of the frozen lake. In the quiet, I could almost hear the sound of that first gate clanging shut years ago, the moment that started it all. Back then, I'd thought it was a declaration of war. But now I realized it had been something else entirely. A challenge. To patience. To principle. To the idea that some fights are worth dragging into the light until everyone learns the difference between ownership and obsession. I ran my hand over the post, rough with age but sturdy, and smiled. Somewhere out there, Karen probably still believed she'd been the victim, that I'd outmaneuvered her unfairly. Maybe she was half right. But the truth was simpler. She'd built a gate out of arrogance, and I'd turned it into a road built on patience. As I turned to go inside, a final gust of wind rattled the old padlock hanging on its nail. It clinked softly like a bell. Closure, I thought. And maybe, just maybe, that sound was her way of admitting defeat.